All right. Okay. So last time we talked about the 6 strategies of growth. Okay. So there really are only 6. And what I didn't tell you is marketing. I want you to think of marketing as just fuel, right? So if one of these strategies isn't really working for you guys, uh, adding more marketing patience to a broken system is not, it's not a strategy. Okay. So as we talked about before, who was here last time? So, okay, so we had a couple people. Okay, so I'm going to cover real quick the strategies, and I promised that I was going to go into the first strategy this time. So there's only 6 strategies to grow a practice, and there are only 6. So one is hygiene, right? Grow hygiene, and the practice grows. And we're looking for that 80-20 split. 20% of your production should be coming out of hygiene, 80% out of restorative. So if you want to grow your practice, the first number you got to look at is what's hygiene doing. And if you want to take your practice from 100,000 to 200,000 a month, it's just simply look at hygiene, and hygiene is going to be around 20,000. And you go, how do we get it to 40? What do we got to do? And we're going to talk about that today. But really, it's really that simple. And when those numbers are out of kilter, meaning your hygiene is 17% or 16% of your practice, it's telling you something. It's telling you that you have a thin patient base, and you're not set for instant growth. And you're going to find that the month is hard to put together. It takes a lot of focus and drive for the team. When you're at 22 or 23%, it means you're inefficient with case development. Okay. So that's hygiene. We're going to dive into that today. The next strategy is kind of our 100% case acceptance, right? So we got to get the majority of our patients accepting treatment. And of course, that's the old 100% case acceptance from Whitehall. This is tell them what they need, but happily give them what they want. It's very difficult to grow a practice when your case acceptance is at 60% or lower on new patients. Okay, so this is a number you all should know, and you should know it by provider, by doctor. So, because doctors can vary dramatically. So a good posture should be aiming at 70 to 80% case acceptance. Okay. Strategy 3 was the staff-driven practice, getting the team involved, getting their motivation, drive, and their focus to a level that is close to the owner doctor, to where you're kind of feeling like the push and drive of the practice isn't really coming from you anymore. It's really coming from, let's say it'd be nice if it came from the entire team, but it should be coming from a good 30 to 40% of your team. You should really feel the push and drive and motivation and of course, we use bonuses. There are all kinds of things that we do to encourage that, but that's a very important strategy. Kind of once you get near the 150 mark in practice. Once the team starts getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the more this becomes important, the team morale and the dynamics of the team. Okay. So that's the third strategy. The fourth strategy was the 12-step development path. Okay. This is the, quote unquote, wow experience for new patients, where everything is perfected at each stop that the new patient has in your office, and that everything is written down, checklisted, scripted, trained on, role played, so that your team, everybody has it exactly down. This has to be wired. Okay, so that's the 12-step development path. Okay, now what makes referrals really pop is mastering that 12-step development path and kind of getting that 100% case acceptance. The two you're going to find that a lot of these strategies commingle. Okay, so referrals, they really tend to happen when you get these last 3 working together. So 12-step development path, the staff-driven practice, 100% case acceptance. If those things are wired tight, you'll see your referrals really grow. Referrals, this is patient-to-patient referrals, okay? The fifth strategy is same-day service. You guys all know that, but Whitehall's been big on that for a long, long time. So same-day service, we have to have that ingrained in the culture of the practice and ingrained in the doctors, that this is how we operate. And then the sixth strategy, and this is where a lot of people gravitate to, and this is the big case strategy, meaning how do I sell more to the people I'm getting? And this can be damaging if you just take that to your current patient base. If you get too aggressive, it can damage basically pretty much all the other strategies of growth. So you have to be careful there. It is a strategy that we typically try to market for patients looking for larger cases, that kind of thing. So each one of these things, I promise we're going to go over them in detail. So this week, we're going to go over strategy number 1, and that is hygiene. Okay, so last time I forgot to tell you, marketing is fuel. It's not another strategy. You've got to have, throwing marketing on a practice that doesn't get good case acceptance it's a waste of money. Who doesn't have the staff to practice, same day service, all these strategies one of them has to be in place and working well for marketing to really pay off. Okay. All right. So let's talk about hygiene. So there's two ways to look at hygiene. There's two problems, okay? So one problem is the day falls apart day of, okay? The other is it's not full to begin with. Those are two separate problems, and a lot of doctors have struggled. When I talk to them, they kind of always look at it as the day. The days always falls apart, and there's nothing on the book, so I don't have hygiene demand. But when you look at the schedule 3 weeks out, 4 weeks out, it's booked out. It's booked out really far. But when the day comes, it falls apart. That's a different problem than it's not booked up to begin with. Okay, so we're going to talk about hygiene coordination. I'm going to give you the system that we use at Whitehall for our practices to manage hygiene coordination as tight as it can be. Okay, so we use, obviously all of you guys use Weave or some kind of texting system for confirmations. So the first text should go out 14 days before the appointment, and it cannot have a way to confirm the appointment through that text. It's just simply a reminder, and it can even say we will send a confirmation text about a week before. So look out for that text, okay? The confirmation text needs to go out 8 days before. And the people that don't confirm tend to be your problem children. These are the people that no-show you, call last minute and cancel. Rarely we see the people that confirm through text be problematic. It does happen, which requires retraining your patient base, which we'll get into that in a little bit. But I would say for the vast majority of you, you're going to find that the people that don't instantly confirm that text are your people that are going to cause you the most problems. Okay, so you get this you confirm 8 days before, 7 days. So the next morning, your team is calling the people that didn't confirm. And we do that for 2 days. So let's say the text goes out Sunday. Monday, you're calling for Monday's appointments next week. Okay. And you call, you leave a voicemail, and you say, hey, we need to hear back from you. You need to confirm this appointment. Okay. Then you're going to call one more time the next day, so Tuesday. So So, so that would be the 7th day and the 6th day before the appointment. The 5th day, you're going to leave them a message saying exactly this. It's really important that we hear back from you by the end of business day today, or else we'll have to release your appointment. So please call us back. And you release the appointment, you double book at this point. If they haven't called you back and they haven't confirmed, and you've texted them, you've called them 3 times, you run the risk of high likelihood that this person is going to no-show you. Okay, these are tend to be flaky people. Okay. Now it's also very important when people call your team back that what does your team say? So we've already identified flaky people who can't just simply say, yes, I'll be there next week, right? These people are basically high risk, let's put it that way. So if your team just takes the phone call and says, oh yeah, okay, see you at, I got you down at Monday at 9 o'clock. Is that going to work? Does that still work? Okay, great. See you then. That's not going to do it. Okay. So what we need is kind of what I would call like a double opt-in. You guys familiar with that with emails where they make you double opt-in for the emails? Well, we want to take a little bit more time with confirming this patient and getting a little bit more commitment from them. Okay. So so we got you down at 7 o'clock. Okay, we'll see you then. Hey, before I let you go, could I ask you a favor? If you can't make it for any reason, would you do something for me? And they're going to say, sure, what's that? My name is Wes. I run the schedule here. And some people call and cancel last minute, and it really makes it tough for me. So I would really appreciate it if you gave me at least a 48-hour notice. Would you do that for me? Okay. This is getting their commitment, and it's tying them to an individual, not the practice. So people are perfectly happy with letting a business down. But they think twice about letting an individual down. Okay. So everybody at the front desk needs to be trained on how to take that phone call and how to use that script. Okay. So, and that's the script. And that's how it needs to be delivered. Getting your team to do it, getting them trained on it, different story. Getting control of your team, I realize that can be very difficult, and getting them to use a simple script, believe it or not, can be the biggest challenge of your life. But so you want to what I call double opt them in, okay? And at this point, you should be running a lot better of a hygiene schedule at this point, and you should be looking around 5% openings. I mean, you're still going to get people cancel last minute, and you can't refill it with somebody else, and that should run around 5%. So on 20 appointments on the book, you're going to have one that you just can't fill. Okay, that's what I would consider acceptable. When you start getting around 10%, that's an indication that either we're not doing our job correctly here, or we have a little bit of an untrained patient base, okay, where they have kind of grown accustomed to calling and canceling on you guys and kind of treating you like in a way that drives you nuts, okay? So this is important that you do something similar to what I talked about when you book the appointment originally, okay? So the hygienist needs to book these appointments. They have the greatest chance of having success. And they're going to use something very similar to what I just said for the front desk, kind of this double opt-in thing, okay? The reason why the hygienist, why they do so well as far as getting commitment from the patient and having them actually show back up, it's similar to going to a hairdresser. So, you know, you don't want to let your hairdresser down when you call and cancel last minute, because it leaves her an hour and a half really with nothing to do. And so most people are pretty good about not doing that to an individual and somebody that they have a strong relationship with. And the person that they have the strongest relationship with in the office is that hygienist. Okay. And they will not want to let this person down. So you need to leverage that. Okay. So what we do with the hygienist is we get the patient to book. So you're going to use the same old script, which is, you don't ever ask, does this time work good for you? Does the same time work good for you? Which everybody seems to want to do. That is not how you ask for an appointment. You ask for an appointment saying, what works best for you, mornings or afternoons? What you never want to ask for an appointment with a yes or no question. Never. Okay. So it's what works best for you, mornings or afternoon. What works best for you, Tuesdays or Thursdays? No yes or no questions, ever. Okay. So that's what they ask for. They get the appointment booked. And then what we're going to have them do is explain how the recall system works. Okay. Let me just tell you how our software works. You're going to get a text message 14 days before, then you're going to get one approximately a week before. And it's really important that you check your schedule at that point, and please confirm as soon as you get that text. If it doesn't work good for you, please call our office, immediately, and we'll get it changed for you. It's not a problem. But if you do confirm, it's very, very important that you try to give us that 48 hours notice, because if you don't, I sit here for an hour with nothing to do. So you kind of got to rub the patient's nose in it a little bit. Okay. And the hygienist needs to do that. Now, some hygienists are perfectly fine doing this, and some, some don't like doing this. But if you've got a problem with, after you run this hygiene coordination system that I'm talking about, if the problem still persists, you've got to go in and retrain your patient base and let them know the how important it is once they've committed to making the appointment that they do make it. Okay. Then we run into kind of the cancellation fees. I've heard all kinds of different things, and I'm against charging anybody. I'm okay with having a cancellation fee and never charging anybody, but kind of making a big deal about it when they call the office and say, hey, I got to cancel. And you kind of go, oh, there's a cancellation fee. Are you sure you can't make it? This is the script. Are you sure you can't make it? I'd hate to have to charge you. And the patient will say, no, I can't make it. You say, hold on 1 second. Let me see if I can do something about that charge. Hold on, do your nails, come back on and say, okay, I got it waived this time. But just next time, just remember to give us that 48-hour notice. Okay. And people that abuse you a few times, you instruct your team to say, it looks like, and it sounds like you're pretty busy. So next time when you have a free day, why don't you just call us and we'll try to work you in instead of putting you on the book. Okay. And that's kind of a nice way to kind of dismiss people. Okay. So that's kind of how you get rid of people that habitually miss their appointments. Okay. So this is hygiene coordination. There are nuances to it, but this is a good overview of how it should be done, and you should take it serious. When somebody misses that appointment and doesn't come in within that 30-day window when they're supposed to, you got like a 50% chance of having them back in the office. Ever. So once they drift out, they kind of stay out. So it's real important that you take this serious and have your team, because this is your practice. right? And if you knew that if you didn't take this serious, that they would never, the half of them would never come back, and that is the truth. And you should take it very, very serious, okay? And you should have somebody dedicated for this. Do not spread the load. One person needs to be responsible, okay? They can have people do it when they're not there, that kind of thing, but they're ultimately accountable and responsible for this, okay? And it is a hated job. Everybody hates it. It's thankless, that kind of thing. So we do have little bonuses that we'll set up for it. So like perfect days, there's like $20 if we get a perfect day. Or you can do $10, doesn't matter, but something for perfect days where you got 20 appointment slots and all 20 are used. So getting them motivated in that seat's very, very important. And getting the right person in that seat also is important, okay? And statistics on the patients leaving, you guys know 90% of the patients leaving the chair should be on the schedule for 6 months from now or higher. Okay, if they're not on the schedule, I can't remember the statistic, but it's like 70% actually show up. So it's a pretty drastic drop off if you don't get them on the schedule. So if you're running in the 80% range, that's 10% of the patients that you really should have scheduled. You're going to lose 3 or 4 of those patients for good. So yeah, you got to stay on your team about that. So that's hygiene coordination. First, before I move on to why it doesn't fill, any questions on that? Okay. All right. So why hygiene doesn't fill in the first place? Why is it not full? Okay. There can be a lot of different reasons, but I'm going to cover the main ones. There's things like the hygienist hurts people. Hygienist is kind of rude. Uh, so I'm not going to cover those kind of things. I just assume that you guys would pick up on that. But the main one of why hygiene doesn't fill is poor case acceptance. That's the main reason. And remember that patients that don't accept your treatment plan on their first visit with you, they're not going to stay long term. The vast majority don't. So that's why it's important to have very, very high case acceptance. 80% is what I would consider very good. I see people at 90% with new patients. Now, of course, they're not buying the whole treatment plan, but they're doing something with the dentist. They're moving forward something restoratively or an extraction. So that number is so important in building the hygiene. And as you bring on associates, their level of case acceptance varies, and it can vary drastically. It's not uncommon for me to see associates in the 40%, 30% case acceptance. That's actually pretty darn common. And it's a scary number because the practice will start to go backwards. At 50%, at 60%, at 50%, it still tends to go backwards, the practice. 60% kind of just stays where it's at. 70, 80%, you'll start to see the patient base actually grow. And then you get into the point of, okay, do we want to pour fuel on this, which is marketing, right? So case acceptance is number one. Now, fees and insurance, things like that also play a role. You can work around insurance. You don't have to be a network. It's a little bit more difficult. And when you are analyzing your fees, if you're really trying to grow hygiene, you shouldn't be at the 90th percentile with your fees. If you have a lot of holes still that you're trying to fill, you should really be like at the 70th percentile. That's an aggressive posture. an aggressive price point to fill hygiene. And once hygiene fills up, then you can start raising your fees again. Okay. So fees is one. Team morale is probably the second most important. So the first one is the doctor, how the doctor behaves, how they interact with the patient, the case acceptance level. That's number one. Number two is the team's morale. When you go into the office, what's the vibe like with the team? Is it like walking into a mortuary, which a lot of times that's what it feels like. The team kind of has the feeling like they don't really want to be here. They don't enjoy their job. They don't have smiles on their face. Uh, so team morale is hugely important in building this. Uh, Next, I would say is convenience. So you've got to have convenient hours. You've got to have peak time capacity, and you've got to watch how full hygiene gets. Once you start getting hygiene booked out around 30 days, your convenience obviously shrinks dramatically, but it's an indication you should add a day of hygiene, add a column per week at around 30 days, when it's booked out around 30 days. Okay. Uh, then you kind of get into this, okay, I can't add a column. We're full, right? We don't have any more room. And so you've got to decide, do we do a build out? Is that worth it? And if you can't, or you don't think that that's smart, then you have to look at a different strategy for growth, which is that's the sixth strategy that I told you today was big case strategy, right? So getting more out of your patients than you do now. So when you're landlocked, you can't get more patients in the building, right? So then you got to look at a strategy. Well, then how do we get more out of our patients? Okay. So pay attention to that. Know where you're at in your practice development. When you get to the point where you're landlocked, there's no more room, and you've done hygiene coordination, so it's as chock full as it can be, and you still want to grow, then you got to look at that as your strategy. Okay. So with building hygiene, it's staying ahead with the growth, right? In terms of its convenience. So making sure that you're looking and adding when you're supposed to add, that you're running a good hygiene coordination so you're not, so it doesn't have a bunch of holes in the bucket. So that everybody stays in the practice. Team morale, and I would say doctor's case presentation, and you might even say doctor's bedside manner, has a lot to do with why hygiene builds and why it doesn't. Okay, so that's hygiene in a nutshell. That obviously can get more complicated and all that kind of stuff, but that's the basics. And yeah, is there any questions on it? Okay, so just if you raise your hand or unmute yourself, I'll take questions. Somebody's got to have a question. Come on. It doesn't even have to be on this topic.
I got a question.
Sure.
Do you kind of have a daily average what you'd like to have a hygienist produce? Of course, that's a lot has to do with fees, in network, out of network. Is there kind of an average you'd like to see?
Yeah, we see kind of still that $1,200 somewhere in that range seems to be a number that we see a lot. So a hygienist should be producing 12 to 15,000 a month if they're working 4 days a week. Somewhere in that neighborhood is what I would expect a hygienist to do. When they start doing more, I would question that strategy. So that's like big case strategy in hygiene, right? So remember what I said, big case strategy can be very dangerous. Well, it's if they really start cranking hard in hygiene, you're just taking big case strategy and applying it in hygiene. And you have to, if your goal is still to build hygiene, big case strategy really works against it. Okay, if hygiene's already full, you've got 5 ops, you can't expand, then those strategies are totally fine. Uh, but yeah, be careful at looking at really trying to crank up a hygienist because it does work against you. It's
So
like going to the, yeah, go ahead.
another question I have is the 20%. I'd never heard that. I'd heard 30%, I'd heard a third, but I'd never. So I kind of did the math of like, so our hygienists, I have 3 full-time. Of course, I have associates, but they average 1,500 a day. And that's because I'm on Delta Premier. So we get it, and we have a lot of Delta patients. So we get a decent fee for that. But if I do the math of 2 hygienists doing 1,500 a day, and yeah, so and we work 200 days, Monday through Thursday.
So you should be doing 12,000 a day, right? I think is
That's what the dentist should be doing, I guess. And
yeah.
it's like, okay. So that 20% seems to work if you have a sedation practice, if you do mostly implants. I just don't see how a general dentist can do that much to keep that at 20%.
That's the number I see all the time. So I talk to doctors all the time. I get their statistics as the first thing I look at, and I would say 95% of them are in that zone within a couple points of that. When you start dealing with associates, they're so bad at case acceptance. That's how these numbers get out of whack. And I would guarantee you that you've got a case development issue. When you got that many associates, I guarantee you they're not doing as well as they should.
Okay.
Yeah. And if they are, it's great, but yeah. And then of course you got to look at your new patients. So if you have an adequate amount of new patients, meaning for the amount of hygiene you have, but if it's thin amount of new patients, that could be a problem.
The one thing with new patients I find though is the age of the patient. If you give me a 20-year-old, they just need to redo their ortho because they didn't wear their retainers. So we might do some Invisalign. But if you give me a 50-year-old that's now got 30-year-old dental work, okay, we got some stuff to do. So boy, new patient age seems to make such a difference.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there's certain areas where it's a little bit more challenging
Yeah.
because it's a younger area, college towns, things like that. But it still runs pretty darn close to around $1,000 per new patient on the first visit. This is how much dentistry they commit to.
Yeah.
And we'll see practices beat that, obviously, but that's a number that we'll see consistently almost in any area. So, and you should know those numbers. You should know on average, this is how much a new patient spends in our office within the first 30 days of being here. And it needs to be over 1,000. And you need to know those numbers based on every doctor that you have. Okay, so you should know how much a new patient is spending within that first 30 days, and you should know their batting average. So batting average is how many new patients they see and how many of them accepted something. And that should be around 70–80%.
Okay.
So when you go analyze those numbers, if you're seeing what I just told you, and with each doctor, and you're at 30% of hygiene, I wonder about that. So I would go look at those numbers and see if you're hitting those numbers that I'm talking about with case development. Of course you will. We'll see you next time. And it'll be interesting what you find out.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, anybody else?
Wes, I just texted you a question.
Oh, sorry.
It's okay. It's by Josh.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm great, thanks. We were just talking with April and Kim the other day about we've had a lot of new patients no show for their visits.
Mhm.
And so we've started to schedule new patients as like a traditional new patient or a complex comprehensive exam, people who haven't been seen in 15, 20 years, or, you know, are interested in sedation, because we find that those patients tend to spend a lot more time in the office.
Right.
So, you know, scheduling an hour and a half in the non-production column out, it takes up a lot of time. When
Yep.
they no show, it's a struggle, because then obviously we could have used that for another new patient. But Steve had mentioned maybe we should have them put a credit card down when they schedule, like you do when when you make a reservation at some restaurants or places, and, you know, so they know that if they no show, that will charge them. How do you feel about that? Or what do you
I've seen
recommend
that.
doing to keep them from
Yes, I've
canceling
seen
as
that.
often?
I've seen that, and I've seen it not work very well, and suppress the amount of people that actually end up giving the card and wanting to come in. It can hurt your new patient flow. It depends on how bad the problem is. So usually we'll see kind of these problems in certain areas or certain, I want to say, you know, just certain parts of the country. So obviously you guys are been around long enough to know you got to get them in quick, right? So if you can't get them in within 2 business days, the no-show rates do go up very high. Number 2, the way the conversation goes on the phone is very important. So if you should go back and listen to phone calls, and specifically the ones that no-show you, and see what the interaction was like with your team member. So a lot of times when we listen to no-shows, the team member wasn't friendly, wasn't nice, and just didn't have really good attitude on the phone. A lot of times that can cause a lot of no-shows. So I'd definitely examine that. The other thing would be use that commitment close that I told you earlier that we use in hygiene. Use that with a new patient. Okay, got you down for Tuesday. Da, da, da. Hey, before I let you go, could I ask you a favor? My name is Wes. I run the schedule here, and you'd be doing me a big favor if you can't make it for any reason, that you at least call and give me I know we're getting close. Your appointment's tomorrow, but if you can't make it, I really got to know, because they all look at me and fill in this schedule, and when there's a hole like this, yeah, so you'd be doing, you gotta make the patient feel like you're letting Wes down. And everybody's gonna get mad at Wes if you no show. And if you can do that, that helps dramatically. And you actually get people, it's shocking, they'll actually call and let you know that they're not showing up. So that works really well. But again, getting your team to do it. A
Okay.
lot of this is just getting your team to do stuff is very tough lately. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I'm not big on charging. I think if you were doing sedation consults, I think that might be an interesting try. I would actually consider trying that. So people that, like you said, these complex ones, I wouldn't be against trying it. I'm for trying anything. So try it for a month, you know, and see if it works. But I wouldn't do it on the rank and file new patients for sure. I've seen that not work. But on the sedation ones, it might work. So, okay. Any other questions? Any other things going on in your office? Just no shows? Go ahead. Are you unmuted?
Yeah, we're still having trouble getting the hygienist.
Finding hygienists.
Yeah.
So there's only one way to find them. Only one way, and that's opening up your pocketbook. You've got to be at the top of the pay scale. I remember last time we talked, if you're running a business or running a practice where you have to be at the bottom of the pay scale or very low or in the middle, because you're inefficient in these strategies I'm talking about. If you're inefficient, then you got to look at how to save a bunch of money everywhere. And you have to be frugal with what you pay your employees. And you want to be able to pay people very well and demand that they perform, right? So with hygiene, you got to look at how much it's costing you to not have a hygienist there per day, and decide, is it worth it for me to pay $5 more an hour to my current hygienist so that I can go recruit and be at the top of the pay scale? So you go to Indeed, you just start looking around and looking at where the pay scale is at, and you got to be near the top. You don't have to be the top, but you got to be near the top. If you're in the middle, you'll get nobody in hygiene right now. There's just not enough hygienists to go around. And so what I'll see is like ranges, like let's say the range is $50 to $60 that you'll see on there, right? And if your ad is 50 to 55, you'll get nobody. Your ad needs to be 55 to 60 is where it needs
We
to be.
were at, on Indeed, we spent maybe $1,200. We were at $55 to $70 an hour. And we got two people. One was a disabled hygienist who was out on disability,
Okay,
hoping to come back in 2 months. And the other one was a dentist, willing to work $70 an hour.
so why the big range? Can I ask
So I
that?
hired her
Well, that's good.
1 day every other week.
Why the big range? 55, why to 70? Why is it such a big range? So that works against you, by the way. So a big range, the first thing employees think is, oh, they're just going to offer me the 55 or whatever. So do not do a huge range. Your ranges should be within $5, something like that. So, uh, so yeah, the range does work against you. So
I had the big range because some of our hygienists make 60, I would say most make 60 an hour. Some make 62 and one makes 65.
so put in there 60 to 65 because you're not going to pay anybody 70. So,
We just did.
oh, well, you paid the doctor 70.
Yeah.
Right. So I get that. But so I'd shorten the range and 60 to 65. If you're not getting people to respond, that means you're out of the pay gap or the range of where people are going to respond. Now you don't, we have people run blind ads to just see where the resumes start to pick up. So I'm not opposed to you testing the marketplace and doing, I say, dummy ads where you're just seeing where the resumes pick up at. In some areas, I found it was 75. At
We
70,
have a low,
at 70, we got nothing. Nothing. So I took it from 60, 65, 70. We did it for months, inched it up. And at 75, that's when we got all the resumes.
we have a local junior college that has a hygiene program, and I suspect they're telling their graduates to not accept positions under a certain dollar amount.
Yeah. And you
I think it's like,
you gotta figure that number out. That's what I'm telling you. There's a number that they start calling you. Now doesn't mean that you have to uh, rush out and hire somebody at $75 an hour, but at least you know that that's where it's at. And you've got to figure out a business model where that you can survive in.
yeah. We're also seeing Delta patients still. I'm like Bill Premier, and I think we're getting a lot of our new patients are coming from other practices that have stopped seeing Delta. So we're getting an increasing percentage of
Well, the other practices having the same problem you have. So where they can't find hygienists, so they're dropping these plans, might as well. Why take discounts when you can't hire a hygienist? And so you're in an area which is not uncommon right now, where it's hard to find hygienists, but it's all about the money. So there's no secret to it. Okay. All right, so any other questions? So strategies in trying to reactivation was a question. Reactivation is you've got to view it like marketing. Okay, so you do your normal reactivation where you call 6 and 3 and 6 months and all that kind of stuff. But there comes a point where you have to view them as lost, and you've got to view them like you would a marketing patient, and do what you would to attract a marketing patient back to the practice. So offers, deadlines, specials, things like that to come back. And what you want to do is a blitz. So in marketing, you've heard that, you got to see a marketing piece 11 times before you remember it, that kind of thing. Well, you can use that to your advantage because you've got such a small list where you can be omnipresent in their mind over a couple week period. So you should text, send letters, emails, phone calls, all in a condensed amount of time with this offer. So you take batches of your list and be all everywhere. And they're just like, I wake up and you're there. Okay, we typically do it over a 2-week period. So a couple letters, couple emails, and a phone call and a text is what we do, outlining what we're going to, and the offer is how bad do you want them back? So think of it that way. You can do a little offer or you can do something more aggressive. And you guys know the cost of marketing somebody into an office. It costs you typically an offer. On top of that, the marketing fee, what it costs to do pay-per-click ads runs about $150 to $200. So there's a lot in going after your existing patients there's a lot you could throw at them in terms of offers and for you to come out ahead, as opposed to going out and trying to fill it with new patients.
Hey, Wes,
So, yeah.
I got an idea on that. So we have 3 full-time hygienists. So we've got a list to work from. But what I tell them is I would prefer to have someone on Delta Premier. I'd like them to be due for x-rays, because there's such a big difference between if they're just due for a cleaning or they're due for x-rays, and maybe they have treatment proposed that they never followed through with. So to me, reactivation, you can get picky with, and you
Absolutely.
can do a lot better with who goes in that schedule.
Yeah, so picking your list
Yeah.
is important. And especially when you're near capacity, this is where you got to be picky about who you go after, right? But when you're not at capacity and you've got a whole bunch of openings, you have to go after everybody. But when you've got just a few here and there and you're close to capacity, yeah, you want to be ultra picky, right? And of course, you guys know that once you get into the 36-month range, the results get weaker and weaker and weaker. So also you should be paying attention to how many people respond to this. So if you do what I'm telling you, some kind of offer to come back, exam, x-ray, or exams and x-rays free, cleaning, $97, something like that. And that includes insurance patients. They, for whatever reason, they respond to that too. Anyways, so when you do that, you should be trying to shoot for around 15% reactivation. That's kind of the number I see a lot. I've seen better, but kind of a number to go, okay, it worked okay, is around 15%. Anything below that, when you start to get into the position where like nobody responded, which we do see, okay, it usually means that you're doing something in your practice to really upset people, that they're not just leaving, they're running. Okay. And so when that number starts to be like 5% or lower in reactivation, it means you're doing something seriously wrong internally that's upsetting people. And of course, the other indicator is your referrals, right? Patient to patient referrals. should be at least 30 to 40% of your total new patient volume. And if you're not doing marketing, it's obviously the majority. You should have at least 20. So those numbers you is an indication, are you making people happy? Okay, so when you reactivate, it is an indication of, are we making people happy? You should get around 15% to come back. If you don't, it means we're doing something wrong. Okay, any other questions? All right, thanks for joining me. So next month, when we come back, we're gonna go into the doctor's role in case acceptance and trying to get 100% case acceptance. And please join me if you have associates, because that's what I'm really gonna drill in on, is getting them to perform near owner level case acceptance. Because there's a lot to it, and what they say and how they say it is what I'm gonna cover. So that ought to be a good one. So please join me next time. All right. All right. See you guys. Thanks.